I had never experienced such bone-chilling fear as I did that night. It all began innocently enough when my parents left for a weekend getaway, entrusting me with the responsibility of staying home alone for the first time. I was 16 and relished the thought of having the house to myself. My best friend, Sarah, had come over for the weekend to keep me company. The first night started calmly. We ordered pizza, watched movies, and laughed into the late hours. Tired and feeling secure, we passed out on the living room couch, bundled up in blankets. Around 2 a.m., I was awoken by a subtle noise from upstairs, something like a soft shuffling. I elbowed Sarah awake, and we crept up the stairs to investigate. But we found nothing out of the ordinary and dismissed it as our imagination running wild in the unfamiliar silence of the house. However, the atmosphere took a sinister turn on the second night. Sarah had to leave, and I was left to my own devices. The house creaked with each gust of wind, making me feel a tad uneasy. I shrugged it off, attributing it to my overactive imagination. Around midnight, I heard something that sent shivers down my spine. It was a faint, muffled whisper, almost like a distant chant. I tiptoed through the darkened house, trying to locate the source of the sound, but it seemed to echo from within the walls themselves. A deep sense of dread began to creep over me. As I returned to the living room, I noticed something peculiar. The television had turned itself on, and the screen displayed nothing but static. I grabbed the remote and switched it off, dismissing it as an electrical glitch. But the whispers persisted, growing louder and more insistent. I couldn't ignore them any longer. I followed the eerie voice, which led me to the basement. The flickering light bulb illuminated the stairwell, revealing shadows that danced menacingly on the walls. Descending the stairs, my heart pounded in my chest as I reached the dimly lit basement. There, in the center of the room, I found an old, weathered Ouija board. It had appeared out of nowhere, and the planchette seemed to move on its own, spelling out sinister messages. Terror overtook me as I realized that something malevolent was in the house with me. I ran upstairs, locked myself in my room, and frantically called my friend to come back. But to my horror, my phone displayed no service. As I huddled in my room, the whispers grew louder, echoing through the house. The walls seemed to close in on me, and I could hear footsteps in the hallway, coming closer and closer. The doorknob to my room rattled, and I knew I was not alone. I could feel an evil presence lurking just outside the door. In the pitch-black room, I clutched my blanket, tears streaming down my face, and prayed for dawn to break. Unbeknownst to me, a sinister man had been living in the house for weeks, and now he had revealed himself with murderous intent. He attempted to break into my room, but I managed to slip out through the window, clambering onto the roof. My nimbleness allowed me to reach the ground, and I sprinted to the nearest neighbor's house, pounding on the door until they let me in. The police were called, and they swiftly arrived at my parents' house. They found the intruder still inside, trying to hide in the basement. The man was arrested and taken into custody, ending his reign of terror. I was safe, but the horrors I had endured during those nights would forever haunt my nightmares. The realization that a stranger had been living within the very walls of my home, just a few feet away, was a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying threats are the ones that lurk in plain sight. Beggar's night had finally arrived, and I, 15 years old at that time, had spent weeks crafting the perfect pirate costume for myself. Emily, my 6-year-old sister, was adorable in her princess outfit, complete with a glittering tiara. This annual tradition meant the world to us. Our parents had always taken us trick-or-treating before they passed away, and it was my duty to continue the tradition. With our buckets in hand, we stepped out into the crisp night, the sky a canopy of endless darkness, and ventured into our neighborhood. The evening had started with excitement, but as time passed, the once jubilant atmosphere seemed to wane, giving way to an unsettling stillness. My heartbeat quickened as we ventured deeper into the neighborhood, and the eerie silence weighed heavily on my shoulders. Our footsteps echoed through the lonely street we had stumbled upon. Out of the obsidian shadows emerged two ominous figures, their faces hidden behind grotesque masks. An icy shiver ran down my spine as I clutched Emily's hand and whispered urgently, Stay close. Don't let go, Emily. The masked figures drew nearer, and I couldn't ignore the fear that tightened my grip on Emily's tiny hand. One of the figures held a knife, glinting ominously in the dim light. Panic surged through me, and I knew I had to act fast. "Emily, run!" I shouted, and my little sister, her princess gown billowing behind her, dashed away. I was left alone to confront the menacing pair. Desperation coursed through my veins as I reached into my plastic pirate chest and hurled a handful of change at them. The coins clinked as they hit the ground, momentarily distracting the masked men. Seizing this opportunity, I sprinted after Emily. Together, we fled through the winding streets, the sound of our pursuers' footfalls echoing ominously behind us. In the distance, we spotted a warmly lit house and rushed toward it, frantically screaming for help. The door swung open, and a welcoming family embraced us, offering safety and comfort, in stark contrast to the horrors we had narrowly escaped. The masked men, realizing their sinister plans had been thwarted, slinked away into the night. The police were summoned, and Emily and I described our attackers in detail. But the two menacing figures were never apprehended, leaving an unsettling feeling of vulnerability in the neighborhood. That fateful Halloween night left a lasting mark on Emily and me. The realization of my responsibility as an older brother, the bond we shared, and the night's terrifying events would forever haunt my memories. Despite the darkness we had faced, we emerged stronger, our love for each other unbreakable. My vow to protect Emily from the shadows remained unwavering. On Halloween night, Mark, Sarah, and I embarked on an adventure that would haunt us for the rest of our lives. The three of us had been inseparable since childhood, drawn together by our shared love for all things mysterious and eerie. This Halloween, we decided to explore the infamous haunted house on Elm Street, a place steeped in dark legends of ghostly apparitions and unsolved mysteries. As we approached the decaying mansion, the moon cast an eerie, pale glow that seemed to infuse every inch of the place with an otherworldly quality. The house itself was a grotesque relic from another time, its once grand facade now obscured by the relentless march of decay. The wood was weathered and rotten, and the windows, long bereft of glass, stared out like empty, soulless eyes. The air grew colder with each step, and the creaking floorboards beneath our feet echoed like mournful whispers. The walls, once adorned with faded wallpaper depicting a forgotten elegance, were now covered in a tapestry of peeling paint and grotesque stains. The passage of time had not been kind to this place, and it showed in every crumbling corner. The oppressive atmosphere inside the house weighed heavily on us, and the howling wind outside only added to our unease. The once picturesque chandeliers that dangled from the ceiling were now nothing but skeletal remains, their broken and jagged arms casting eerie, elongated shadows that danced in the dim light. The walls bore the marks of time's cruel embrace, with jagged cracks running through them like scars of a wounded soul. Dust-covered furniture lay strewn about haphazardly, as though the spirits within had expressed their unrest by tossing these remnants of a forgotten past. We ventured deeper into the darkness, drawn by an inexplicable curiosity and a growing sense of foreboding. The house seemed to have a life of its own, and it pulsed with the energy of forgotten memories and suppressed anguish. We could swear we heard faint, disembodied voices carried by the wind, the whispered cries of the restless souls that had once called this place home. As we continued our exploration, the paranormal activity grew more intense. Objects moved on their own, and shadowy figures flitted in and out of our peripheral vision. The child's laughter turned into sorrowful cries, as if the spirits of the house were trying to communicate with us. We knew we had entered a realm of supernatural terror, and it was in this nightmarish environment that Sarah's fate took a gruesome and macabre turn. In the flickering ghostly light, her body was seized by an invisible force, and it was as though a malevolent entity had decided to make her the centerpiece of its malevolence. Sarah's limbs were contorted in unnatural angles, and she let out a blood-curdling scream that pierced the very heart of our souls. The room seemed to grow colder with each passing second, and our breath formed frosty plumes in the frigid air as we watched in sheer horror. The malevolent force twisted her body further, her bones snapping like dry twigs, the sound sickeningly audible over her screams. Her eyes, once filled with terror, began to bulge from their sockets, her face a mask of unimaginable pain and suffering. Then, with a final gruesome twist, the invisible entity shattered Sarah's spine, her agonized scream abruptly silenced. Her lifeless body, grotesquely contorted, was flung against the wall with a sickening thud. Her limbs hanging at unnatural angles, her neck broken, and her life cruelly extinguished. Mark and I screamed in abject horror as we witnessed this nightmarish and ghastly spectacle. It was as though the house itself had become a monstrous entity, feeding on the terror and agony it had inflicted upon our friend. We fled from the haunted house in a frenzied panic, leaving behind our dear friend in a state of unspeakable mutilation. Even after we left, the memory of the haunted house on Elm Street remained etched in our souls, a chilling reminder of the malevolent force that had claimed Sarah's life in the most gruesome and horrifying way possible.